Tribal revolts in Chota Nagpur region. The Chota Nagpur region consists of thickly forested hills and plateaus extending in the states of Jharkhand, Odisha and West Bengal. It forms the habitat of several tribes including Mundas, Gonds, Santals and Kols. The Kols were the first to rise in revolt against the British because of the gradual extension of the British authority in their area. These freedom-loving people guarded their frontiers for a long time and did not allow strangers to enter their territory. They resisted the attempts of the British officials to enter their territory. Many of their people were killed and villages were burnt. In 1827, they surrendered, but only temporarily. Santals. Santals owned large tracts of land and believed that their lands were blessed by their ancestors. Thus, they were very attached to their lands and forests for economic and religious reasons. Due to the new system of land revenue called permanent settlements, Santals were completely deprived of their ownership of land. They were reduced to the status of tenants and were obliged to pay land revenue to the British through the zamindars. As the British rule expanded, roads and railways were laid down to facilitate the penetration of colonial rule. In 1853, work started on the construction of railway line and it was expected that it will give employment to around 1 lakh people. As the Santals realized the disadvantages of the introduction of railways and its effect on their traditional lifestyle, the poor Santals were forced to borrow money from the moneylenders in order to pay their taxes. The cruel moneylenders saw to it that the Santals were put to prison if they failed to repay the debts within specified time. It was observed that the alienation of land on a large scale with the tacit approval of British administration was the main reason for this rebellion. Organized on a vast scale, the revolt swept across the region of Santhal from Bihar to Odisha. Frustrated by the repeated attempts on their part to seek justice from courts, the peasants raised their voice. It finally resulted in a series of open revolts against the British. The revolts are collectively called Santhal Liberation Movement. On 30th January 1855, a large crowd of Santals assembled in a farm in the village of Bhagnadihi in Santhal Pargana. They declared themselves to be free from British rule. They vowed to drive the British out of their land. These developments shocked the British. During the course of their war with the British, Santals were able to gain control over a large territory extending from the Rajmahal Hills to Birbhum. The British rule in these areas temporarily came to an end. Historians have expressed shock at the brutalities committed by the rebels, but chose to ignore the humiliation that peasants had to suffer in the hands of moneylenders and the landlords. The Santals killed many British officials and moneylenders. It forced the colonial administration to declare martial law in the area, where tribals succeeded in destroying even a semblance of British rule. The Santhal rebellion was finally crushed by the British troops. It was an unequal fight, but the peasants were armed with bows and arrows on one side and soldiers were equipped with firearms on the other. Although the rebellion was largely suppressed in 1856, it continued in some areas till 1857. As a result of these revolts, the Santhal Pargana Tenancy Act was passed. The act provided certain concessions to the Santals. They were assured protection against imperialist exploitation. The regular police force was abolished in tribal areas. Instead, the responsibility to maintain law and order was given to the village headman. Munda Rebellion. The Munda Rebellion was one of the prominent tribal protests in the subcontinent. Birsa Munda led this movement in the region south of Ranchi. This rebel movement during 1899 to 1900 was known as Ulugan or Great Tumult. The Mundas traditionally enjoyed a preferential rent rate as the original clearer of the forest. But in the 19th century, this land system was eroded by merchants and moneylenders. During British rule, many non-tribals migrated to the traditional tribal areas and grabbed the land owned by the tribal groups. In due course, the tribals were forced to work as laborers under non-tribals. The rebellion was aimed to drive away the British and establish Munda rule in this region. Birsa Munda was a strong young man who claimed to have divine powers. The locals considered him the god's representative on earth. He strongly protested against the non-tribals occupying tribal lands. He also disliked the zamindars and moneylenders who ill-treated Mundas. He advised Munda farmers not to pay rent to the zamindars. The entire Munda community joined under the leadership of Birsa Munda, who started the revolt in Chota Nagpur region. They attacked British officials, missionaries and police stations. However, British captured Birsa Munda and suppressed the rebels. Munda rebellion led to the passing of Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act in 1908. This act tried to help the Mundas by banning forced labour. The act assured local customary land rights to the Mundas in their villages. Besides the above act, the government initiated several steps to bring the tribals and administration closer to each other. Government officials were now stationed closer to the Munda villages so that they could speedily attend to the grievances of tribal people. The religion also contributed to the growing socio-economic consciousness among the tribals in Chota Nagpur. Trivia: Birsa Munda's call against the British Raj was Abua Raj Ste Jana, Maharani Raj Tandu Jana. It means, let the kingdom of Queen be ended and our kingdom be established. Trivia: the Jarawa people are one of the last surviving tribes in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Trivia: Birsa Munda is the only traditional leader whose portrait hangs in the central hall of the Indian Parliament.